Hey everyone, welcome back to this channel. Another installment of Revolutions, Diary of My Spins. Been on holidays this week, so lots of records have been spun. I'm going to start with classical music as per usual because I feel that it is a little bit underrepresented. Um, this morning I was playing this beautiful piece about Dvorak, violin concerto in A minor, directed by Daniel Barenboim, the great pianist slash conductor. Sorry, the director. And the violin is played beautifully by Itzhak Perlman, one of the masters of the violin. People obviously know about Yehudi Menuhin, but Itzhak Perlman is probably, if not on the same level. This is very romantic sounding, very. It's just a gorgeous concerto. I didn't know very much about this one, but I would very highly recommend it. It's on EMI. Yeah, it's lovely. And I was also playing this fantastic Pablo Casals rendition of the cello concerto by Schumann. Now, I'm a big fan of the cello concerto by Dvorak, but this one, which is less familiar to me and to most people, I would say, is also worth investigating. It's a bit lighter, a bit less serious than the Dvorak piece. And it's followed by five pieces in folk style. Pablo Casals was one of the greats of the cello, and I strongly encourage you to investigate his work. Um, and this morning, I also really enjoyed this piece. I love Bartok, and is one of my favorites. And this is yet another sort of configuration of Bartok with this large string slash winds orchestra. It's the Romanian folk dances, the Vertimento, and there's a piece by Leos Janicek, played by the Orpheus Chamber Orchestra, all being very, very beautifully played and just, well, they are folk dances, Romanian folk dances, so they've got these melodies running through them. They're kind of, mysterious and lovely to listen to. And then a couple of CDs. This was a fantastic listen. No Time for Chamber Music, Collective Neuf. Collective Neuf or Collective Nine they're a collective from Montreal. The artwork in it is actually gorgeous to die for. Look at this. And they're from Canada. They're from Quebec, Canada. And you've got violin, viola, cello, and double bass. It's nine, obviously nine musicians, and they play symphonies or bits of symphonies by Mahler, which doesn't really delve into chamber music. It's more like big orchestra, big symphonies. If sometimes concertos. So it's a very interesting mix of styles, but I would highly recommend a listen to this. And I spent a bit more time, and I've talked about this before, with this Keith Jarrett playing the 24 Preludes and Fugue by Shostakovich, which is just to die for. It's a delightful record, very highly recommended. I'm going to talk about some new releases from here in Melbourne. Here is the 7-Ups. Here's the name of the band, the 7-Ups. Actually, this is in the plastic. I'll just take it out for a second. The 7-Ups are an Afro-funk collective from Melbourne. And this is their 5th or 6th album. I don't know, I've lost track. I've got 2 other of their albums. I love them. They're made of, you got trumpet, sax, flute, trombone, guitar, organ, bass, congas, percussion. And Mindy Meng Wang, who I've spoken about on this channel many times, plays the guzheng on track 2, which is the title track, A Free Blowing Wind. This is a very dynamic, highly sort of dense, um, yeah, Afro jazz kind of sound. I don't know if Afro jazz is the right term, but I can't think of anything else that fits that terminology. So it was released this week. So it's a brand new record. I've played it about 3 or 4 times. I love it. And another album that dropped this week, this past week, very highly anticipated for me, was the new Godtet plus strings, featuring Novak Manojlovic, who is a classical a string arranger, composer, conductor, and you have here an additional bits of cello, viola, violin. So it's basically Godtet, the jazz band from Sydney, playing at the Vivid Festival in 2022 and being arranged, well, having an arrangement with an orchestra or like a string ensemble. It is a very beautiful record. It's recorded live. I mean, you can listen to this on Bandcamp. There's a track called The Broadening, which I would recommend. And this made me actually revisit this other beautiful Godtet record. I talked about the first 3 Godtet the other day, but this is also really worth getting. And this is a more ambient side of Godtet. So Godtet, obviously, as I said last time, they're a new jazz band, a sort of mixing jazz and electronics. From Sydney, and they're headed by a guy called Godriguez, who plays the guitar and the organ, and they're a fantastic band. I love them. Last Friday last week, my friend Amos and I, we went to see this amazing band called Tanga. I spoke about Tanga in the past video. They're a Japanese South Korean duo, husband and wife, who live in Seoul and make very new agey ambient, sometimes ambient house even music. They look like they belong to a cult. They're in robes, big medallion. I'll put some footage on. And the gig was at the Curtin in Melbourne, and well, they sold us the record. They had no staff. They just. But what was incredible was that the kid, who's probably like 10 years old or whatever, is 10 or 12 years old, was part of the act, and he was on stage playing the synth, being this kind of like, robed guru synth wizard of epic proportion. It was mind-blowing. I think the footage will tell you more than. And this is their latest album, not yet released, which is fantastic. It's very sort of progressive electronic. And I also purchased 2 of their earlier releases, which I'm still sort of delving into. This is great, kind of very Noi influence record, or sounding at least. And this, I'm going to admit, I haven't really delved too much into, but as it was part of the gig, I'm showing it here. Now here's a record that I could have fitted easily in my classical section at the start. It's the soundtrack for the fantastic Solaris, the Tarkovsky classic, one of the most mind-blowing sci-fi movies ever made. And this is, obviously it's the soundtrack of the original movie, because it's been remade since, and there's a new soundtrack by Cliff Martinez. But this here is by Edward Artemiev. I just love the gatefold. This is obviously a reprise that came out in 2013, which I've had for a while. I don't really care or mind what I've got there. It sounds really good. But it's a very classical score, very avant-garde classical. Reminds me in parts of things that you would hear on a 2001 Space Odyssey. Is Ligeti, for example, when it's close in spirit at times. It's a beautiful soundtrack. I revisited my copy of In C by Terry Riley, one of the probably greatest minimalist pieces of composition. Two sides, about 20 minutes each, or thereabout, where including variations on the note C, on organs. Terry Riley. I spoke about Shri Camel last week, and I think people seem to agree it's a fantastic record. Here is a release on the fantastic Ramble Records. It's called Hailstar of the Sea. The name of the act is Seven Rivers of Fire. This album is from 2021, I was 22. And the dude is called William Randalls, and I believe he's from South Africa, and makes this very lo-fi but very highly listenable brand of American primitivism, but with a more sort of ambient, experimental side to it. So it's very recorded very lo-fi on. I think a lot of it is recorded on like mobile phones and things like that, and it's it's a great. I mean, if you are into Jack Rose and people like that, I'm not going to say Joan Fahey because it's not really that school. It's it's rawer, more experimental than that, but very cool record. Then I just revisit stuff on my shelves, obviously, and I pulled out the Mighty Conference of the Birds, Sam Rivers, Dave Holland, Anthony Braxton, and Barry Altschul on percussion and marimba. Easily one of the greatest ECMs out there. I mean, it's loose, it's free, but it's not too free. We're still in a domain of like, if you're scared by free jazz, avant-garde jazz, this is still quite accessible. From 1973 on ECM, a promo copy, as you can see. An absolute must-have if you like ECM. I don't know. I've got a couple of CDs there. I might just showcase this one very quickly. Now, this is... You'll never see anybody else in the vinyl community show this. It's like as obscure and as obscure. This is Love and Death. This is the name of the band, and the album is called Can Open Mind. They're a duo. They're from Australia. I think they're from Sydney from memory, or perhaps Melbourne. I can't remember. This was released in 1998 and is a mix between abstract experimental rock, psych rock, raga rock. I'll put the Discogs tag underneath this right now, and you'll see how it's described. It's got about 20 descriptors because it doesn't fit in any box. It's a hodgepodge of really bizarre music, but it's really worth listening to because at times you've got the impression you're listening to Stereolab. Some other times you've got the impression you're listening to Sonic Youth. Some other times you think you're listening to Can. Sometimes you're listening to Kraftwerk. Sometimes you're listening to Captain Beefheart. It's a very strange album, and it only exists on CD, so don't get your hopes up of getting this on vinyl. And I also revisited this fantastic album by Mouse on Mars, on Warp. Sorry, this is on Thrill Jockey. Excuse me, I said Warp, but it's because it's a kind of a Warp sound. It's an electronic album, largely sort of like kind of ambient techno, ambient house album. It's called Autodidacta. 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 The fuck. I'm just talking about albums. I can't even. Here. There we go. There we are. It's a great album. That's what I'm gonna say. You can shit on me if you want. Um, I revisited Guillaume Melle's tome six, with the jazz electro notes. I mean, I think it's a really well named band because it is kind of electro jazz, space jazz of sorts. I mean, this is from like what the 60s perhaps. This album, it's great. It's it's got, I don't even know the year of this, but I'm guessing it's like a late 60s kind of a deal. Um, yeah, it is like, there's bits of Sun Ra in there and meets kind of, there's a sort of, oh, I don't know, man. I don't know. Have a listen to it yourself. Who am I? I'm nobody. Um, I hadn't played this forever and ever. This came out again in 2011, which is when I bought this. I remember early days VC, 2011. They reissued this record. This is the band's called Ursel Mats, and the album is Svenska Lud Up. And this album is kind of a classic of the Swedish or Scandinavian, or maybe jazz scene. I want to say it's a funky psychedelic jazz album. Lots of breaks on it. It's been sampled to death, I think. And yeah, this is when I bought it in 2011. Great record. And it says there at the bottom, if you're paying more than whatever, yeah. If some buggers, there we go. If some bugger charges more than £2 for this, don't buy it. Well, yeah. Now try to buy this for even this reissue for any less than. This is a numbered reissue. This funky record. It's a bit like Placebo, or a little bit like, Cortex. It's got that kind of sound to it. And I will finish. Oh yeah, I still have a few there. I revisited a lot of Coltrane. I just felt like Coltrane this week. Village Vanguard, superb record, one of his best, really. If you want to hear Coltrane at it live best, probably this album will actually get you there. As the classic call it, with Eric Dolphy on top of. Great. I was talking about Impressions last week. It's of the same ilk. I revisited the Lost album that came out both directions at once, which came out in 2018. And out of all the archival releases by Coltrane, I think this probably would be my pick of the bunch. It's very, very good. And I revisited this under the radar, underappreciated Coltrane. The John Coltrane Quartet plays Chim Chim Cherry, from 1965, with again classic quartet, but with Art Davis on bass for Nature Boy. I don't think many people talk about this record. It's a very, very, very underrated record. It's one of his best, easily. And finally, I picked up a reissue of Black Octopus by Paul Jackson. Now, this is a Mwandishi album through and through. It has Herbie Hancock, I can't talk, Webster Lewis, Benny Maupin, Alphonse Mouzon on this, and obviously the great Paul Jackson, who is an ace of bass. I mean, really, this is a funky, fusiony record. 1978, only came out in Japan at the time, so very hard to get. But the Tidal Waves music, I've done a really beautiful reissue of this. I encourage you to check it out. It's funky, Mondishi style. I think a lot of people would really enjoy this. And the last record I'm going to show you, I'm going to do a big shout out to my friend Bruno, who has a channel called Breton Vinyl Corner. He's from Brittany in France, and I'm going to link his channel. And he showed this record in his last video, and my local store happened to have a copy, and he inspired me to pick up a copy. This is a funky classic from Haiti. It's a musical style called Rara, which is the sort of local funky music from Haiti. And the band's called Aizen, and the album is called Diligence. Okay. And it's a great funky island record, which I think a lot of people would enjoy. So that's it for this week. Hope you enjoy this installment. A bit sort of rushed, but talk to me as usual. Take care. Love you all.